I think we're good to go. So I'm gonna guess I'm live. I can see Napheet on the chat in front of me. What I'm going to do is going to start the timer and then I'm going to say hello. So thank you so much for having me, first of all. Hello and welcome. My name's DJ. I'll introduce myself a little bit better in a second. I'm super honoured and delighted to be virtually with you today, speaking to you remotely. I think it's absolutely fantastic that Napheet has organised SAP Inside Track Chandigarh, the first, I think, is that correct? And Napheet, if there's anything, by the way, that you need to tell me to slow down, to speed up, if things go wrong, let me know in the Twitch chat. Yeah, I can react to that. So actually, Napheet, can you type something in the Twitch chat as well, so I know that you can still hear me? Otherwise, yeah, I'll get going. So yeah, thank you. I'm so delighted to be able to talk to you today for half an hour, 35 minutes on a subject close to my heart, which is learning and community and sharing and everything, and also moving out of your comfort zone. I want to say a big hello. I'm over here in Manchester. And I wanted to wave to you folks down in Chandigarh. So hello from the sun has just come up, sunrise, and it's quite windy and cold, but it's quite nice. So there we go. Hello from Manchester. I want to tell you a little bit about me. Basically, I work at SAP. I'm very proud to work in the developer relations team as a developer advocate. I've been hacking on SAP for a long time, over 30 years. I also like running, especially in the rain and the cold and the dark. I also like drinking beer in small glasses, which is a little bit odd, but there you go, that's me. And I enjoy streaming live coding stuff on Twitch, like we're doing here now. And one of the regulars in the live stream family is, of course, Napheet. And it's through that live streaming that I've got to know Napheet, and I'm very honoured to have been invited by him. I've written a few books, co-written some as well, and you can find me on GitHub, on Twitter, and here, of course, on Twitch, QMacro, maybe QMacro99 on Twitch, and you can find out more about me and read some stuff and have links to the my stuff on the SAP community from qmacro.org/about. There's only a few slides here, by the way, and then we're going to go straight into some sort of hands-on stuff. I'll explain that shortly. One thing I did want to draw to your attention, given that it's an inside track and it's all about the community and developers. If you haven't been already, go and visit after today, developers, or during today, developers.sav.com. There's all sorts of stuff there for people like you and me. There's tutorials, there's stuff to download, there's documentation of various things and links to documentation in other places. There's all sorts of community activity, there's blog posts, there's Q&A, there's coffee corner stuff, and of course you find out information about events as well. Events, not just SAP Inside Track events, but also, for example, code jams. Made myself a nice cup of coffee here. Right, and much more, yes, of course. So when Napheet put my name down, having asked me, of course, put my name down for the agenda, all he wrote was some crazy stuff. So that, I guess, is what we're going to be doing. But more specifically, I just wanted to take half an hour with you folks to think about how we might move beyond our comfort zone. Now, my comfort zone for a long time was the ABAP stack. I started out a long time ago, as I say, with SAP, and then ABAP came along, and I was doing ABAP for a long time, and I felt very comfortable. The tools were familiar, and I needed though to break out of just that single system, single way of thinking. And I thought one way for people today to break out into beyond the ABAP stack into the open source world, into open standards and so on, and into something that's super important in the SAP development ecosphere as well as beyond, which is OData. If you're familiar with building OData services, for example, or consuming them in the ABAP stack, which is a very common thing using the gateway components, what I want to do is to show you that actually OData is not just tied to the ABAP stack. You can do OData stuff really easily now with something called CAP. And I'll explain what CAP is. Well, it actually says there in the description, the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. CAP-M, although the M is silent, as they say. And with CDS, some of you may have already been using CDS as well, Core Data Services or Core Data and Services, and JS, there's a lot of acronyms there, JavaScript. So I want to just show you how easy it is to move out of the ABAP stack with something familiar, OData, and start to play around with OData outside your comfort zone. Because of course, you don't want to completely dive into a deep end of freezing water. You want to dive into a deep end of warm water or into a shallow, well, you don't want to dive into shallow anyway. Stupid metaphor. You want to sort of take small steps where things remain familiar. And that is, in this case, OData. Okay, so now that is all the slides I've got. What I'm going to do now is, hopefully, if I do this right, I'm going to switch to the other scene in OBS. I'm just going to wait for it to change, and then I'm going to move across to see, where's it going here? Is it working? I'm going to move across here. Let me just make sure. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the scene is switched. Perfect. Okay. So over here on my right, on the right of the screen, we have something quite familiar. It's an OData service, and specifically it's an OData metadata document for a well-known service called Northwind. I picked Northwind because it's publicly available, and it's a really nice service in that it's got things that we can easily understand, such as bigger for terminal font, size bigger, size bugger. Ooh, that's good. Size bugger. There we go. There's the. I'm going to make the OData service huge, and I'll make the terminal font even bigger as well. There we go. Right, I'm assuming that should be okay. Perfect. So the OData service Northwind has products, has suppliers, has categories, has customers, has orders, and so on. And it's very familiar to us. In fact, I'm going to make this full screen for a second, because what we can do, for example, is here say, well, let's have a look at the products. Let's familiarize ourselves with what that is. And by the way, this is a version 4 OData service from odata.org. And as you can see, the default output is JSON. If you played around with OData before, especially on the gateway component on the ABAP stack, you may see XML, because that is the default for OData v2 service representation output. And you can see here, you can do all sorts of different things. You can say, for example, you can do some filters, filter equals, I don't know, units in stock greater than 20, and we get a smaller number of output here. But we can also, for example, say $expand equals supplier to have a look at the relationship between a product and its supplier. We could go the other way, of course. We could say here suppliers, and yeah, here's got one I did earlier. Let's just find the suppliers in the UK. There's 2, and then we'll have a $expand products to say, well, show me the products. Okay, so I don't want to go. This is not about OData itself. I just want to make sure that you see that this is a normal OData service, and what we're going to do is we're going to, in a few steps, in 25 minutes, I've got my countdown timer, Napit, so I'm hopefully aware of the time. I'm sure you'll shout if I go too short or too long. What I want to take us through is a journey to recreate a subset, at least, because we haven't got the time, a subset of this public OData service, Northwind, with very, very few lines of code using the cloud application programming model and using the declarative syntax of CDS. I just want to sort of dispel any myths that it's really hard outside this sort of comfort zone of the ABAP stack. So let's do that, shall we? We'll start with a blank sheet of paper, as it were. So I've created a directory, SAP Inside Track CHD. There's nothing in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command called CDS. I don't want to show you how to install CDS. It's very simple. It's just a node module. I've installed it globally. You can do that too. I'm going to use the CDS command to initialize a project. Okay, I'm going to initialize it as simple as possible. What it's doing is pulling modules down from the node package management website or server, as it were. So we're talking in terms of JavaScript and server-side JavaScript, which is Node.js, and Node.js has this package management system called NPM, which CDS uses to manage packages and interdependencies for itself and for things it relies on as well from from the open source world. So now we've initialized a project, and that project now, that folder is called, in fact, we've initialized it in this folder, node modules. Okay. In fact, what I wanted to do is, we'll do that. Yeah. In fact, what I meant to do, see this init Northwind. Let's just do that one more time. We're going to create the folder in Northwind. There we go. Oh, that was quick. Northwind. There we go. So now, when we have a look at what it's created for us, it's not actually very much. What we've got most importantly is this package. This package.json, which describes what's in this project and what this project relies upon. And as you can see here in the dependencies section, it's the package or the project that we've created is depending on two packages: the CDS package from SAP and the Express package, which is a web server framework for Node.js. There's all sorts of other things in there, but we don't really need to worry about that. So we'll go on up here. I'm going to remove this folder as well because we don't need that. There's all sorts of ways you can build and write CDS for CAP. I'm choosing to do it in a really raw fashion. There are super tools available for VS Code. Makes it very, very, VS Code is super comfortable anyway. And there are extra tools that SAP have produced, an extension for VS Code to make it very, very comfortable and easy to write this stuff. So what I'm going to do is quit out of there, and I'm going to start in the simplest way possible. In fact, what I want to do is I want to create another window or another pane here, and there we go. Let's go out here, Northwind, there, Northwind. Now I'll also install a little monitor program that will sit there and look for files being changed and then restart things for me. So we're just going to install that, and it'll take a second to install that. While we're waiting for that to install, what we want to do is start defining from scratch our Northwind service. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll create a folder called serve, and this is by convention, and we'll create a file in that folder called service.cds, and in fact we'll edit it. Okay, so that now is the place we're going to start defining our Northwind service. Okay, so we want to define service Northwind like that. Okay, and that's the simplest thing that could possibly work. Okay, literally we've written one line of code. I'm going to go down here and start npx and start running something that will listen out. There we go. So we've already got now a service. It's not going to do very much, but we'll see what happens in a minute. We've already got from nothing, using the CAP engine for Node.js in the form of the CDS command line tool. we've got a service running on localhost 4004. So what we can do is we can go straight there and have a look to see what happens. And we've already got a nice little sort of welcome page here, and it already knows that the service name is Northwind, and it will allow us a link to the metadata service. However, as you've seen here, and this is deliberate, as you've seen here, we get an error, okay? And it's not really surprising because we haven't really made much effort to define that service. And as you can see here from the error at the bottom, entity container must contain at least one entity set, okay, obviously. So why don't we fix that by saying entity there we go. We've now given it what it wants, okay. Let's just save that. We've now responded to that error. We've given it an entity set, okay. We'll define an entity set with the entity keyword, but now it's saying, and this is great really, because it's starting to tell us that, yeah, it knows that we're trying to define an OData service, and it says entity northwind.products does not have a key. OData entities must have a key. Okay, so let's give it what it wants and see if it will then restart. So well, I'll go up here and say key ID integer. Okay, so we've defined, I've not saved it yet, we've defined a property in the products entity, just like you would do on the ABAP stack. That property is a key property, and it's defined as being of type integer. I'm going to save that, and what happens at the bottom, we can see the app restarting, and it's restarting with no errors. So we can go back across to have a look to see what the metadata now looks like. So we can see already that with what, 5 lines of code, and most of those lines are sort of empty, we've already got something that's starting to look like a real actual OData service. I mean, how easy is this, right? All we've done is written 5 lines of declarative code. So the next thing we want to do is to start to sort of flesh that out. And I want to show you how easy that is too. But while we could define everything in this single service.cds file within the serve directory, there's a reason I created the serve directory. Think in terms of 2 layers of definition. You have the layer of definition which is the services that are consumed by front ends, by APIs, by different applications and so on, which may need different views and different ways in and combinations. Maybe some things excluded, some things included, and so on. So this is almost like that's the service definition layer. And then of course you have the core persistence data model or schema layer, where you have the core entities and the basic relationships between them. And that is something that sort of sits below the services. So you have this sort of, nice oiled movement between the two, so you can have flexibility between your persistence layer and the service consumption layer. So what we'll do is we'll realize that and split the 2 layers off, and we'll have the service definition in this services file, and we'll create another file. Let's go down here and create that file. Well, in fact, we'll create a directory, db, and we'll create a file called schema.cds. Okay, and we'll start that again, and we'll go up here, and what we'll do now is we'll open up db schema. In fact, I want to open up both of them, don't I? Service, there we go, service that one, and we'll have that there. There we go. So we got our, I want to move that out into here. Okay, and I'll move that back a bit. What we'll also do is give this a namespace. Why don't we call it sit? Yes, let's call it sit. Namespace sit. So all the entities that we define here are within the namespace SIT, SAP Inside Track. So now we're back to where we were in terms of the service definition and the, let's move that down a little bit. There we go, one more time. Yeah, there we go, that's better. Yeah, so let's save that. And now if we go across, we get the error again because it's saying entity container must contain at least one entity set. We've got this empty service again, so let's fix that. But instead of fixing it by typing in the entity definition, all we have to do is reference using SIT from DB schema. What's it called? Schema.db schema. And then we can reference it's very early in the morning, I can't type very well at the moment. Projection on sit dot products. It already can see that it already understands the reference from the using declaration. So now what I've done is I've moved the definition of the persistence layer schema description of the products, which only has a key at the moment, up to the schema level or down to the schema level. Maybe I should have them the other way around, I don't know. I've got that entity definition that points to the products definition in the service layer. So if we save that now, which I just have done actually, yeah, there we go. Let's go back over here and let's refresh. And we're back to where we were. So that's nice. We've sort of split these things out here. What we can now do is we'll go up and start adding the rest of the entities that we want to use for this demo. We looked at Northwind at the suppliers, we looked at the categories. Oh, we didn't look at the categories, but we will look at the categories, and we looked at the products. So I'll bring those in very quickly now. In fact, I've got here a quick way of adding these rather than you watch me type this. Suppliers and also categories. So now what I've done, in fact, let me just zoom this one in here and make that a little bit bigger. So what we've now got in our persistence layer schema definition, we've got a products definition with some properties, we've got a suppliers definition, and we've also got a categories definition. Okay, but we've also got to reference those two in our service layer. So let's have that. So let's have suppliers, and let's also have the categories. And now when we save that and move across to our metadata definition, we should see something that looks a little bit closer to the real Northwind metadata definition. We've got our three entity sets that are generated automatically for us. Categories, products and suppliers. We've got our entity type definitions here. But what we haven't got are the relationships between the different entities. If you see here in the metadata document for the real Northwind service, what we're really missing is, for example, the relationship between the category entity type and the products that belong to that category, a navigation property. But we can really easily define those, and I've deliberately left those out to define manually. Yes, this is SAP Inside Track Chandigarh, organised by Napi. So welcome. So SAP Inside Track Chandigarh is expanding across the world. We've got viewers from elsewhere. That's really cool. So welcome. So now what we want to do is define those relationships, and I want to do that manually because just to show you how simple it is. So we'll say, well, a product has a supplier, and these are called managed relationships because basically CAT will take care of the definition of the foreign keys and so on completely for you. So we'll just use the power of managed relationships. We'll say association to suppliers, and we also have a category for a product as well, of course, and that of course needs to be associated to the categories entity definition. But that's only a one-way relationship. What we want to do as well, or what we need to do really, what we should do, is have the reverse relationship as well. So if we say here, a supplier has a relationship to products. So products association, but it's not just a supplier doesn't have one product, it has possibly many products. Association to many products, and then we build the description of how these things are linked, the foreign key helper, I like to think of it as, association to many products on products dot supplier equals $self, which is a reference to me as in this particular entity. And now we'll just copy that line there because it's actually almost the same. The category also has products, a category has products associated with it. The only difference is, of course, that the foreign key relationship is based upon category. And that's it. Okay, now I'm just going to de-zoom and we can see there that, is that still working? There we go. Oh, there we go. Let's run that again. Make sure everything's okay. That's excellent. And I will also zoom back in again. Now, let's go back and go to the our own metadata here. And now we can see, just with a few lines of almost English, it's declarative, it's beautiful, it doesn't move, it doesn't break. We can see that we've got a way of defining those relationships, and they're defined here for us. So we now have an entity type categories, and we've got the navigation property to the products, and we've got the products entity type, and that's got a relationship to suppliers and also categories, and so on. What we're missing, of course, is some data, and I want to show you how easy that is, because of course if we go to products, okay, the service will respond, but of course there's no data. There's not even any persistence layer. We've done everything right now without even a back-end database. We're running locally, so CAP supports HANA, for example, for use on SAP Cloud Platform, but it also for development and this sort of thing, trying things out and building stuff locally, supports SQLite. There's also plans to support other persistence layers. So why don't we go back across to here, de-zoom that, and also let's say make it a little bit bit smaller, and go down here, and as you can see, when we made that request to the product entity set, it did actually say, oh well, there's a database connection missing here. So what we'll do is we'll install as a development dependency, but that's we don't have to do it this way, but as a development dependency, the driver for the SQLite database. So the SQLite is a really nice lightweight database system that uses files, actual files on the file system, to store the data. So what we'll do as well is I've got some CSV files, and one of the beautiful things about the way that CAP has been designed and the way that CAP works is that it adopts this convention over configuration approach, which means that if you do certain things in certain ways, magic will happen. Really, we'll see a little bit of that magic right now when we start to bring in some CSV files. So we've installed the SQLite package, and we can see that now in the dependencies, in the development dependencies down there at the bottom on line 20, we can see that SQLite has been installed as well, and as a development dependency alongside NodeMon, which we're already using. Okay, so now what we'll do is we've got this DB folder here, right? Inside the DB folder, we've got our schema.cds, which you can see up there. Convention-wise, if we, and I've got something, where is it? Store CSV to DB. What I've now done is, wait a minute. So let's go to DB, make the CSV, move star.csv into CSV. There we go, that should be better. Yeah, so now we've got, alongside our schema definition file, we've got a CSV folder. What I need to do is actually rename these. One second. There we go, that's better. So they're now named according to the namespace and also the entity. So now when we do our first deploy, our very first deploy, with the deploy rather than the run command, of course, it's going to say, well, there's nothing, you know, I don't know what you want to deploy. Okay, so if we say now CDS deploy to SQLite, and let's call it data.db. SQLite, can I find module SQLite? What's going on here? npm, did I not install it here? A second. I've got 4 minutes left. I think we're okay. Nappy, let me know how we're doing for time, whether we've got another couple of minutes. We'll just install this again. I'm not quite sure what went wrong there. Let's just try it again. Oh, okay. Well, what I'll do is I've got something that I've got here in my prep folder. So I'm going to go into the prep folder, prep, and I'm going to show you that. That's exactly the same. We've got our CSV files and we've got our model. It's exactly the same. And we've got our service file as well, which is there as well. The only difference is that I was going to show you this later, but I haven't got time. One example of having a difference between the service definition layer and the persistence layer, the schema, the model definition layer, is that we can do things like, oh, well, for this particular service here that we want to define, we want to exclude certain properties. So we're excluding a property here, picture property. So that's what we're doing. So now when we deploy, let's quit out of here, CDS deploy, the magic will happen and it will find the CSV files inside the CSV directory, in the DB directory, and say, well, obviously these match up to the namespace and entity type combination of the things we've defined at the schema level. So I'll just write the data into the database. So once we've done that, we can then restart and hopefully we should see some data. So now let's go back across here. Let's go back. Oops. I've just hidden that by mistake. 1 minute. Let's go back. Where are we? Oh, there we go. Let's go back to our Northwind metadata. Okay, exactly the same as before. Well, in fact, because we've switched to this alternative, we should be able to see here that the categories entity type now is missing the picture property because we've excluded it explicitly. Okay, so we've got a couple of more minutes. What I wanted to show you is, for example, when we looked at products before, we got that message, no connection to database, but now we got our data. This looks exactly the same as the data that's in the real Northwind OData service. Let's just go back here. Let's make this a little bit smaller because I want to just show you really what that thing is all about, what we've done here. Let's go into the actual folder where we are. All we've got and all we're using to build and to service this particular OData service is our model definition. Okay, we've got our CSV files in here and we've got this service definition. But now what we want, and of course let's just prove to ourselves that this really is a fully fledged fully operating OData service, we can, for example, here say, well, what are all the discontinued ones? Let's see if there's any discontinued. Yeah, there's some discontinued stuff. We can also do the filter like suppliers. Let's click suppliers. Filter equals country equals UK. I think there's a couple in there. There we go. So this is all out of the box. We haven't had to do any coding at all. Oh, there we go. The timer is complete. I'm going to turn that off. There we go. Oh, no, I can't turn it off because I've got your chat there. Perfect. The timer is complete. I can put it on mute, can't I? How do I put it on mute? There we go. Perfect. The timer is complete. And I've got one more thing to show you though. What you want to do, of course, is not be content with the standard out-of-the-box standard processing of all the OData operations like create, read, update, delete, query. You want to modify them as well. And here's an example. It's sort of serendipitous that something went wrong with the other thing. But anyway, here's an example of how easy it is to build in some custom logic. This is super simple as an example, but to build in some custom logic. What I've done, and all you have to do, convention over configuration again, is to create in the same folder, for example, as the service definition, a JavaScript file, service.js, of the same name as the service file, your CDS service definition file. And in that JavaScript file, you can write logic. And in fact, I'll make it a little bit bigger or a little bit with more white space so we can see. And what we're saying effectively here is for the service, after every read operation on the product's entity set, process the following. Use the following callback to enhance the data that actually goes back out in the response. And this is really simple. All I'm saying here is each dot discontinued, and this is JavaScript by the way. If there's the discontinued flag is yes for the product, and there's still product in stock for that discontinued product, then set the product name to have sale on, because they want to sell out, right? They want to sell the last items for those particular units in stock. Now this is already live. As you can see, it was actually updated down there. So let's now move across to here. Let's have a look at the products again. Just to point out again, this is not the real OData service from Northwind, from the odata.org website. This is ours that we've built in this last half hour. So we can see we've got some products that have been discontinued. We saw them before, right? Discontinued. And we've got, there we go, there's a product that's been discontinued, but there's no units in stock. But here, for example, here's a product that's been discontinued. There are units in stock, and there's our little string sale on. Just to show you that it's actually working at SAP Inside Track Chandigarh. Let's rerun that, refresh that, and there it is. And I guess that's a good note to end on. I would have liked to have shown you more, but really I hope that gets you thinking. And I hope it also helps you realize that there is life outside of the ABAP stack. It's not scary, it's super friendly, and also if you take something that you know and love from the ABAP stack, like OData, and think, okay, how can I do that outside of the ABAP stack to start learning new technologies like CAP, for example, which is super interesting, and of course with CDS, which you already may know, you can start playing around with stuff that you already know outside of the ABAP stack and build from there. And what today, the rest of today is all about is learning new stuff, learning about new colleagues and new friends you've got in the Inside Track world and learning from each other. So thanks again so much for having me, and thanks for those extra few minutes, Napit. I wish you a wonderful rest of the Inside Track, and yeah, that's me done. Thank you, Napit.